McDonald's is a place to rock. It is a restaurant where they buy food to eat. Listen to the music.
Meow meow.
People flock here to get down to the rock music.
Rock and roll McDonald's.
Rock and roll McDonald's. Rock and roll McDonald's. Rock and roll McDonald's. Rock and roll McDonald's.
Meow 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 meow. Hindi lang mali-mali. Mali. Mali. No, I haven't played this game in a while. Rock and roll McDonald's. Oh, frick, that was negligent discharge. I'm trying to damage his gun. Jeez. Oh, come on.
I think it also... Let's take a look at a cheap solar charge controller from AliExpress, also available on eBay. Super ridiculously cheap for what's actually inside it. What's the catch here? But anyway, before we continue and before I disassemble it, let's take a good close look at this and how it gets used. So this unit, in its default status, shows the current battery voltage, and the little arrow there pointing to a light bulb shows that it's powering the load. It's got 3 sets of terminals here. It's got a set for the solar panel, it's got a set for the battery, and a set for the load. And it's important to note that when you're wiring this up, you should connect the battery first before the solar panel. I think that's because the open circuit of the solar panel could cause issues, but they do say that it can potentially damage it. That's also probably because the battery itself is powering the unit, but the standby current is only 2 milliamps, which is acceptable in the scale of this unit. It also has the USB outputs. Not tested them at full current. It does make quite bold statements, but I can test that later on. So to program this, it's suitable for use with apparently 12 or 24 volt batteries, and it's suitable for the technology sealed lead acid, lithium or lithium iron phosphate. So to go through the settings here, if you press the menu button once, it shows the current float voltage. There is a little image of a solar panel appears here when it's charging, little arrow points the battery, and you can change that if you wish. Any of these settings can be changed, say for instance the float voltage, by pressing and holding the menu button at that point in time, and then you can adjust it down or up, and then press and hold again to go back to the main setting. I think it also reverts back after a time. So the first setting is the float voltage. The second voltage is the minimum voltage that it will put power out to the load. See the little arrow going to the light bulb there? The next setting, because I'm explaining this, it reverts back to the start, but the next setting after that is the cutoff voltage. See the empty battery and the arrow to the load? If it goes to that voltage, it cuts off. It's worth mentioning that the minimum voltage for actually initiating power to the load, this one here, is the point at which it will cut back in. It's got a good sort of level. You can program it with hysteresis that it's not going to cycle on and off just based on the voltage fluctuating in the battery. The next mode is the timer mode. You can choose that when it gets to 24, that means it's going to be on all the time, but you can set it down to say at dusk you want it to come on and run for 8 hours. Or you can put it right down to 0, and if you do that it will go in dusk to dawn. It will turn on at dusk and turn off at dawn again. The next mode is the battery type. B1 is the sealed lead acid batteries. B2 is the standard batteries, one can charge up to for about 4.2 volts, and the next one is the lower voltage lithium iron phosphate type batteries, which I've just missed that because it reverted back. Oh, go back, round again. B2, press and hold, and you can then go up to the lithium iron phosphate, or indeed just step back down to the sealed lead acid. I would recommend, just because this is using a computer to control the charging, I would recommend that you also have the hysteresis, that it's not going to cycle on and off just based on the, by pressing and holding the menu button, and you can change that if you wish. Statements, but I can test that later on. So to program this, it's suitable for use with, apparently, 12 or 24 volt batteries, and it's suitable for the technologies sealed lead acid, lithium, or lithium iron phosphate.
Youngstown, sardines, and corned beef. 3 times winner of International Award for Best Quality and Excellence in Spain.
So to go through the settings here, if you press the menu button once, it shows the current float voltage. There is a little image of a solar panel appears here when it's charging, little arrow, point to the battery, and you can change that if you wish. Any of these settings can be changed, say for instance, the float voltage by pressing and holding the menu button at that point in time, and then you can adjust it down or up, and then press and hold again to go back to the main setting. I think it also reverts back after a time. So the first setting is the float voltage. The second voltage is the minimum voltage that will put power out to load. See the little arrow going to the light bulb there? The next setting, because I'm explaining this, it reverts back to the start. But the next setting after that is the cutoff voltage. See the empty battery and the arrow to the load? If it goes below that voltage, it cuts off. It's worth mentioning that the minimum voltage for actually initiating power to the load, this one here, is the point at which it will cut back in. It's got a good sort of level. You can program it, the hysteresis, that it's not going to cycle on and off just based on the voltage fluctuating in the battery. The next mode is the timer mode. You can choose that when it gets, if you have 24 hour, that means it's going to be all on all the time, but you can set it down to say at dusk you want it to come on and run for 8 hours. Or you can put it right down to 0, and if you do that, it will go in dusk to dawn. It will turn on at dusk and turn off at dawn again. The next mode is the battery type. B1 is the sealed lead acid batteries. B2 is the standard lithium ion batteries, one can charge up to for about 4.2 volts, and the next one is the lower voltage lithium iron phosphate type batteries, which I just missed that because it reverted back. Oh, go back, round again. B2, press and hold, and you can then go up to the lithium iron phosphate, or indeed just step back down to the sealed lead acid. I would recommend, just because this is using a computer to control the charging, I would recommend that you also have overcharge and over discharge protection on the battery itself, except for sealed lead acid, which is more resilient to a little bit of overcharging and stuff like that. Not that resilient though. Other things worth mentioning, I believe you can toggle the load on and off with this button. And in any mode other than the default setting, if I press this one and go into another mode, if you press the up button for a while, is this going to do it? I've not tried this. It reverts back to its default settings, its factory settings. Okay, now you've seen that, let's take it apart. I would also recommend that the battery that's connected to it does have a fuse in line. That does kind of make sense. Gets rid of the blue tack I was using to set that up at an angle because the display is not that clear. You may need to shine a flashlight on it. It doesn't light up, to the best of my knowledge. In fact, it definitely doesn't because I've seen the display inside. Right here, let's disconnect this and open it up. It does have rising clamp terminals. This is good, but it's worth mentioning, and it's quite important that if you aren't careful putting wires into these, it's the rising clamp terminals that also have the little void below them, so you can stick a wire in and it feels as though it's going in, and you can tighten it up and then it will just pop right back out again because it can go underneath the terminal. It's worth mentioning that. The same applies to circuit breakers, some designs of circuit breaker, which isn't great because people can slot them over bus bars, tighten them up and think they've got a good connection, and then the bar just pops out or it starts burning. Okay, let's pop the back off this. I have shown this in another video when I was just looking at stuff that had arrived in the post. The back plate is metal. The reason it's metal is because it also acts as a kind of heatsink. Now these are available in different current ratings. This one is a 10 amp one, which means it can provide 10 amp to the load. But as with all these things, I do tend to recommend underrunning because it's just better. They tend to be quite optimistic with their values. So the back comes off, revealing a not guaranteed connection onto the back of the transistors. So that also is a reason not to get too much current from a unit like this. And then just get...
Let's turn music into notes. Go. Drag in the audio, name it, transcribe, and done.
Setting up a 100-watt solar panel kit is not hard. You might be intimidated when you first see the diagram that comes with your kit, but if you look closely, you'll see it consists of 4 main parts with 3 connections. So this whole video is just going to consist of us making those 3 connections. You can definitely do it even if you're a complete beginner to DIY solar. So let's just jump right in. Step 1 for virtually every 100-watt kit is connecting the charge controller to the battery, okay? So what do you need for this step? You need a screwdriver, and you also need the battery cables, which are sometimes called tray cables. They look like this. They have ring terminals on one end, and then they have strip wire on the other end. Then you need to locate the battery terminals on the charge controller. So look at your charge controller and look for the terminals that have a battery icon or the letters BAT or BATT next to them. Those are your battery terminals. So my charge controller has a battery icon, and then one terminal is labeled with a plus sign and one is labeled with a minus sign. Obviously the plus sign indicates the positive battery terminal, okay? So we know which terminal we're starting with. And then you're gonna pick the positive battery cable. So if your battery cables are color coordinated red and black, then just pick the red cable. If yours are both black like mine, then just arbitrarily pick one of the cables. And then we are going to insert the stripped wire end into the positive battery terminal. So unscrew the terminal with your screwdriver if it isn't already unscrewed. I'll just do that right quickly. And then take the stripped wire end of your positive battery cable and just stick it into the terminal, and then use your screwdriver to screw it shut. And I like to really tighten it because these wires can, they have a tendency to slip out. So now I've got the positive battery cable in the positive battery terminal on the charge controller. And next, I'm gonna grab the ring connector, or the ring terminal as it's also called, and then I'm gonna find the positive battery terminal on my battery. How do we find that? It's very easy. You look for the red one, the one that's color-coded red and has a plus sign next to it.
Man, sorry, I wasn't looking at the live chat. Hello, are you new here?
Find the positive.
I don't think you're new here. Oh, I mean, hello. Yeah, hello. I'm watching.
Battery terminal on my battery. How do we find that? It's very easy. You look for the red one, the one that's color-coded red and has a plus sign next to it.
Man.
So this one is my positive terminal, this one is my negative terminal. What we're gonna do is we're gonna thread this ring onto the bolt on this terminal. But before moving on, consider wearing some gloves and safety glasses for safety reasons as well as for peace of mind. Sparks can happen, and we'll see one later on in this video. So I'm gonna grab some safety glasses and just some basic work gloves and put these on. Now we're gonna unscrew the bolt on this battery. So if yours has a plastic cap, just pull it off and then use your screwdriver or a ratchet if you have one to unscrew the battery terminal. Try to move this a little closer. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the ring connector from our positive battery cable and we are gonna thread it onto the battery bolt. And then we're just gonna screw the bolt back onto the battery. But wait, are you using an inverter? If you are, which I'm sure a lot of you are, then inverters typically have two types of connectors on them. They'll either have ring connectors or they'll have alligator clips. If your inverter has ring connectors, then you are going to want to thread the positive inverter connector onto this battery. So I just went and grabbed a small 150 watt inverter that I have, and if we look at the connectors, we can see what I'm talking about. So these are also ring connectors, and save yourself a lot of time and hassle later on. Just go ahead, and if this is the kind of connector your inverter has, then thread the positive one onto the bolt as well. So if you look, it's kind of hard to see, it's kind of hard to hold, but on this bolt, I've threaded on the positive battery cable and the positive inverter wire. If your inverter has alligator clips, then you do not need to do this. You can worry about this later, which we'll talk about. So I'm gonna now screw this on to the battery terminal. So at this point, our positive battery cable is connected from charge controller to the battery. We're gonna repeat that process with the negative battery cable. We'll locate the negative battery terminal on the charge controller. In my case, it's the one next to the battery icon with a minus sign. And then locate your negative battery terminal on your battery. And mine has a little cap, which again, I can just once again, I'm gonna use my screwdriver to unscrew the negative battery terminal if it isn't already. Then I'm going to insert the stripped wire end from my negative battery cable. I'm going to kind of hold it in there, and then I'm going to use my screwdriver to tightly screw the terminal shut. And once that's done, you can always give it a little tug test to make sure that the cables are indeed in there securely. And then I'm going to unscrew the bolt on my negative battery terminal. And now what I'm gonna do is what I call getting the spark out. Basically, there are components inside the charge controller that will charge up once we complete the connection to the battery. So what that means is once we touch this terminal to our negative battery terminal, there might be a small spark. It's not dangerous, and it doesn't happen every time, but just in order to basically get that out of the way so it's not startling, I like to just take the negative terminal and touch it to the battery terminal. Okay, so there wasn't a spark this time, but yours might spark. And then once it's touched, it basically the internal components have charged, and then we can take it and continue threading it on to the bolt like we did with the last one. And once again, if you have an inverter, you can do the same with its negative cable, touch it. In this case, once again, no spark, but we will see a relatively big spark later on in this video. On this negative battery bolt, I have the negative battery cable and the negative inverter cable. And then I'm going to, so I got that bolt on there, and now I'm gonna use my screwdriver to finish off the job. So now our battery and our charge controller are connected. And how do you know? The lights will light up, telling you that indeed the charge controller is on. And if your charge controller has a screen, then the screen should turn on and it will start telling you some system specs like battery voltage. There's one last thing we need to do, which is we need to select our battery type on our charge controller. Every charge controller does this a little differently, but you have to tell it what type of battery you're using. In my case, I'm using a lithium iron phosphate battery, So I'm gonna tell my charge controller that I'm using a lithium battery, and it's already set to lithium, but I'm gonna show you how to change it on this charge controller in case you're using it. I just hold down this button for like 7 or 10 seconds until the blue button starts blinking. Now that it's blinking, I just press the button to, toggle between different battery options. And I'm just gonna go back to blue because I'm using a lithium battery. Now that it's blinking blue, I just press and hold that same button again for about 7 to 10 seconds until it stays solid blue. Okay, so now I've told my charge controller which kind of battery I'm using. So now step 1 is done, and we've completed our first connection of charge controller and battery. The good news is it only gets easier from here on out. So let's just move right on to step 2. The second connection is connecting the solar panel to the charge controller. What you need for this one, you need, once again, your screwdriver, and then you need the solar adapter cables, which are these ones here. They have these connectors on the end, which are called MC4 connectors, and then at the other end, they are, once again, stripped wire, which is what we'll be connecting to the charge controller. First, we're going to want to locate the positive cable on the solar panel. Quick safety tip is if you're outside, throw a towel over your solar panel or flip it over. I suggest flipping it over because it's just easier to access the cables that way. And doing that stops it from generating most of its power. So I'm going to flip it over right quick to get easier access to the cables on the back. With it flipped over, you're going to want to locate the positive solar cable, which they should be marked. Your cables should be marked. You can probably see this one has a red plus sign, and this cable has a negative minus sign. So this is obviously the positive cable. Also, for every solar panel I've ever used, the male MC4 connector, which is this one, is on the positive wire. So that's another quick way of telling. And then we're gonna find the positive solar adapter cable, which, once again, yours might be color-coded red and black. Mine are both black. So I'm gonna pick the one with, with the female MC4 connector on it. And then to connect it, all I have to do is just push the connectors together until I hear a little click. And now I have this whole wire, which connects to the solar panel, and then a stripped end on one end. And we know what to do here. We locate the positive solar terminal on the charge controller. So look for a solar panel icon or a sun or the letter PV. That tells you which terminals are the solar panels. PV module is another way of saying solar panel, so that's what that's referring to. And then find the positive one. So for me, that's this one here with a plus sign next to it. And then we're gonna insert the stripped wire end like we did with the battery cable. So unscrew it if you need to, and then just stick it in there and, kind of hold it steady while you use your screwdriver to screw the terminal tightly shut. So now I've got the positive solar panel cable connected to the positive solar terminal on the charge controller.
Hey, quick question. What is this little black thing between the solar panel and the charge controller on my diagram?
That is actually a fuse, and they're sometimes included in the wiring diagrams that come with some of these kits, but they're not included in the kits themselves, which is kind of funny. It is a safety best practice to fuse your system at certain points, but it's not necessary for your system to work properly. So I'm not going to touch on fusing in this video because they're left out of every 100-watt kit I've ever seen. So moving on. Now we are just gonna repeat that process for the negative solar panel cable. So grab the negative solar panel cable, and then you're gonna grab the negative solar adapter cable, which is the one with the male MC4 connector on it. And I'm just going to connect these like I did before. Find the stripped wire end. Then I'm gonna find, once again, the negative solar terminal on the charge controller, and screw this in there. And so now the solar panel is connected to the charge controller. And for the magic to happen, we are actually gonna take the solar panel outside and put it in a sunny spot. Even if it's not that sunny, or in my case, it's just later in the evening, you'll probably still see what we're about to see. So put your solar panel outside if you haven't already, and come back inside and look at your charge controller. As you can see, mine has a light that has started blinking. It's the PV light. PV refers to solar in this case. And for this charge controller, a blinking PV light means that everything is properly connected and the solar panel is safely charging the battery. The second connection is done. We just have one more to go. The third and final connection is connecting the inverter to the battery, which some of you already did in step one. So if you did that, you can just go ahead and plug in a device to see if you connected everything properly. So I have a little lamp here, plugging it into the small inverter I connected when I was connecting the battery. Some inverters have a switch, so you might need to go and flip it on. Mine does not, so I'm just gonna turn on the lamp. There, so this inverter is properly connected and we know it's working. If you did not connect your inverter in step one, then it's time to do it now. This is a 2000 watt inverter and it does not have ring connectors, it has alligator clips. So I just have to clip these to the correct battery terminal. Obviously positive, negative, negative. I'm gonna start with the positive cables. So I just have to clip them to the battery terminal. The way I like to do it, so like with this one, I like to do one sideways like this, grab the other one, and peel back these plastic parts and clip the second one that way. And then I just repeat the process for the black ones on the negative battery terminal. But warning, I'm laughing because there's about to be a spark. This is a big inverter, and so when I complete the connection by touching these alligator clips to the battery terminal, there will be a spark. And it always just startles me a little bit, but fair warning. So I'm just going to touch it and sort of get the spark out as we did before. Oh shit. Okay, well that was anticlimactic, but usually there's a big spark. So I'm just going to connect them to the terminals the way that I did before. So now this inverter is connected to the outside. You want to disconnect the solar panel from the charge controller first. If you disconnect the battery from the charge controller first, you can damage the charge controller, especially these cheaper charge controllers. But guys, if you entered this video as a complete beginner, you now have a working solar panel kit or solar panel setup, and a lot of what you learned are sort of foundational skills in DIY solar. If you have questions about this particular setup, let me know in the comments and I'll try my best to answer as many of the questions as possible. But that's it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one.
My beauty hack.
Okie dokie, right. So,
as I heard stories that they are using directly the solar panel with the battery, you should never ever do that because you are destroying your battery